Welcome back to the Octave Leap podcast, where today we are diving into the nature of how we experience reality, the nervous system, and our capacity to hold more life. And my guest today is Amelia from Devotional Alchemy. Amelia, how are you doing on this fine day?
Hello everyone. Hello, David. First of all, thank you so much for the invite to this podcast. I feel very excited, a little bit stressed, but mostly excited to be here and to chat with you today. I feel very good. Yeah, like I said, excited.
Great. Yes. So today, like we've chatted a little bit. I've been following your content for some time, and it's always so on point. Like it's like you're really kind of like hitting the nail on the head sometimes with some very subtle things that are also the things that undermine people. So I guess where does your inspiration draw from for, sharing what you share with the world?
Well, thank you, first of all. And yeah, it usually comes from my experience and from the inspiration. So, I get like thoughts coming to me. People may call them downloads. I just call them my thoughts. And yeah, they just come through. Sometimes they come through when for example, go live. Or recently we chatted a little bit before the podcast, and another thought came through, like a bigger understanding about something. So it just, yeah, comes through inspiration, but it's connected with my experience. So it's more from the experience rather than some like scientific knowledge, although I do learn a little bit about that as well.
Mm. So, what was your experience that led you on this path of what you do now, which has to do with helping people expand their nervous system capacity and really reset their energy to live a thriving life? How did your experience lead you to what you do?
Yeah, so I've been a very depressive and sad uh, child, maybe not child, but more teenager. And I've been like always drawn to men that were not right for me and didn't even be so interested in me. So this experience was very, very painful. Like I was experiencing lots of rejection. And because of that, I was almost all the time crying, like on daily basis, very depressive, self-destructive. Till when I was about 20 years old, for a few years, I was mostly bedridden. I didn't do anything, or I was just leaving my bed to go on parties to numb myself even more and to escape reality even more. And in 2012, on the party, I lost my phone. My phone was my everything because when I was bedridden, I was mostly on my phone or on my computer watching series. And when I lost my phone, and I was like traveling to school. I didn't have my phone, and I was always like on my phone or listening to music. So that was the first time I actually borrowed a book, and the book was called Awakening by Anthony de Mello, and it was like the first time I learned more about spirituality, even though my mom was always into Buddhism, Zen, and always tried to get me to meditate, but I was very ignorant and didn't want to listen to my mom. So I had to borrow a book from my friend. And that was like the first time I started to be interested in this topic. But for 7 years, I was still bedridden most of the time. And instead of being on my phone, I was reading books more. But still, I wasn't like really getting help or, yeah, just learning more psychology or about the nervous system, about the emotions. I was mostly interested in about the spirituality and more like new age spirituality. So I was for about 7 years in this. My view on the world changed slightly, and my states changed, but very, very slightly. Sometimes I had like, better days, but still I was crying most of the days. And I was like, yeah, very depressive. My mom thought that I may have depression. She wanted me to go to a therapist. And, but 4 years ago, it was the first time I started to learn more about emotions, about trapped emotions in the body, more about psychology and how traumas affect us. And this is also when, because I used to be massage therapist, um, this is when a pandemic came and I couldn't massage. So I was searching for some alternative for a job. And because I was already 7 years in the spirituality, I really wanted to um, just, do some work around that. But of course, I wasn't like really healed myself yet. So I did this training uh, for quantum healing. And this is the modality that I use now, only that I kind of expanded it further. And it's based on the emotion code or body code, which many people know. And when I started working with this, I already felt like quite better because I started working with like the inner masculine as well and more grounding. So this grounding kind of helped me a little bit with the emotions as well. But later, started working with this modality, and it is based on releasing stuck emotions on energetic level, and also like the entity attachment and various other energies as well. And when I was practicing it, mm, within 2 months of practicing it, I already started to notice huge change within my emotional state. Like the first thing I noticed was that I wasn't looping in pain like I used to, because when I was crying, I could like cry for hours without any relief. But then I started noticing that actually I feel the relief after crying, and it's much shorter time when I do this. So yeah, I started experiencing some healing because of that. That's how I was drawn there.
It's interesting because that you mentioned that you're bedridden for a number of years. Um, and it's funny because in my work, like I've created this trifecta system that you could actually like map in based on your time of birth in a genetic. There's a genetic code. Literally, one of the write-ups is that like this pattern, if it sets in, usually starts in childhood, furthered in teenage years. But as it sets in as an adult, it can lead to being bedridden and depressed.
Mm,
And it's very interesting because the explanation of that is that this is like fear that we're unable to confront within our being, right? So we're only able to kind of reach the symptoms of the pain, but there's a fear of actually going deeper and penetrating into that core trapped emotion. So it's very interesting to hear you validate that through saying, yeah, like when I did this work that went deeper, like because quantum healing obviously works at a foundational level, right, of our being, like our blueprint level, right? And so when you work there and up, it's sort of like you're able to actually access that deep point that's otherwise you're cut off from, and sort of push it up and out so that it reconnects with your conscious awareness and your emotions and the things that happen in daily life. So that's fascinating.
mm.
And
I love
I could
that
see that.
explanation. It's a bit
Yeah.
different to what I see it, but yeah, it's on point as well.
Mm. Well, yeah, I guess you could say too, like when you rebalance the your core frequency at a quantum level, it's sort of like everything else kind of comes into sympathetic resonance with that.
Yes.
Everything else
Yeah.
follows suit. Yeah. Awesome. So it sounds like you went on a deep healing journey, and then you also really felt the call to help others with this as well. And
Yes.
so that's something that you've been doing over the last few years as well. And has that been a very how's that experience been for you working with other people?
Yeah, it's been absolutely incredible, magical, fulfilling, just so, so amazing. And Yeah, because when I started noticing the change within myself within these few months, and I got certified in this modality quite quickly because I was like so into this and I was like practicing all the time. So I got certified very quickly. Um, and I started working first with people, for free just to tell me how they experience it. And they started really noticing changes as well. So quite soon I started charging and working with clients. And even, this, I don't know, it's been around 4 years ago. Even at the beginning of this work, I was already having incredible results with clients. And I remember one that just stayed with me so deeply because it's been so absolutely magical. When I had a client that she didn't tell me that before. She told me that she was depressed, but later she told me that she didn't have willingness to live and she had like suicidal thoughts. And we did a session, and I was guided because I work with the muscle testing, so I am guided through the muscle testing. I was guided to her heart, and we released some emotions from the heart. And on this session, she said that she feels so much lightness in her heart, like the weight of the whole world was lifted. And we only released few emotions. And then she said she regained her willingness to live. And it was such a quick result. Like normally, I try to say to my clients that, you need to do the work, you need to follow my practice afterwards. It's not a quick fix, but sometimes those miracles happen even on the session. And I have many clients who experience that on the session as well. But I still try to, communicate that it's not me healing you. It's not, it's more people are healing themselves and they only experience this kind of guidance through me. And of course, there is connection to, I believe, God and their souls, which also perform the healing. But yeah, it's been absolutely magical and incredible.
Yeah, I mean, the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't get it to drink, right? The horse has to choose to do that.
Yeah.
Similarly, what we could do as facilitators is we can maybe cultivate an environment that is conducive to healing, right?
Mhm.
And you can facilitate guidance maybe for their mind to focus on, but they have to make that choice,
Yes.
right? That I've seen it as doing the work that I do. I've done, forms of quantum healing and working with the Akashic records in the past. And I would always see that. It's like some people get, you do the same process. Some people would get huge results. And then other people, they would get to the point and it becomes very apparent to both you and them that there's an unwillingness. I'd ask people, do you really want to release this? And then they'd be like, now that you say that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Sometimes we
So,
have some benefits
mhm,
to holding
yeah.
to some patterns.
Yeah. I mean, it's the old saying, like when you're ready, the teacher, the healer will be there. Right. So
Mm.
the ones that work are the people that are primed, and you showing up for the session or the sessions is just an acknowledgement of that next step that they're already on, and you're the person that's right to facilitate that. It's a
Mm.
beautiful part about life. It's like we're kind of a passenger in this car of life, right? It's like we don't need to force anything.
Yeah, just open trust.
Yeah. Okay. But it sounds like the work you were doing in the beginning was more metaphysical. However, now you've shifted into more nervous system capacity. Yeah, I guess could you just let the listeners know what is nervous system capacity for you?
Sure. But first of all, it's still very metaphysical and still is through the energy work. I just try to focus on the body and on more um, like grounded spirituality. So, yeah, for me, the nervous system capacity is like the ability to regulate or run certain processes, such as mental, emotional, energetic, physical processes. And Yeah, we can have low capacity to that. We can have high capacity. And it really depends on the state of our nervous system. When the nervous system is healthy, healed, it will have high capacity, right? Some people may have high capacity in the nervous system, even if they experience lots of trauma. We may have different constitutions. And some people will have weaker nervous system. They maybe didn't experience very horrific traumas, and still their nervous system may have really low capacity. So it's very different to everyone. Um, and not everyone will need this work. Some people just naturally will have high capacity and be able to process their emotions with more ease. Of course, I feel like neurodivergent people may need this work more than maybe neurotypical. I myself believe I am neurodivergent, so it really helps me with various um, like adverse symptoms of neurodiversity. Um, so yeah, that's the capacity. Um, but if you have any other questions, we can go deeper in that.
I kind of want to talk about neurodivergence a little bit, actually, because it's a very fascinating subject. Because I believe people coming in now, like kids coming in now, and for a couple decades before, there's a new biology that's forming in the human species. It's in 100 years, we might not even be called humans anymore, it might be something else. Um, but neurodivergence is typically associated with that new biology. And, the old system doesn't know how to label it. And often people struggle
Mm.
because they're still in the midst of the older system. But through, working with human design, for instance, or even trifecta, it's like you can see based on a person's imprint at the time of birth if they're going to be having more of this new biology or they're going to have more of a traditional biology. And
Mhm.
there's four variables for that. So, you can have partially, you can have fully. So like I myself, I'm kind of half between both. So I can get along great with the new humans, and then I can also kind of like party with the old humans too, because I'm still kind of like so it's just a little aside that it's fascinating. But often when I've found that neurodivergent people are working in their zone of genius, things happen very fast. When the conditions are right. When the conditions are
Yes.
off, their degree to which they go off, they usually experience, like things blow up quicker, basically.
Yeah, I have a little example from my life because
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
I used
Yeah.
to I used to never finish tasks or have big difficulty in starting tasks. It was quite okay in the middle, but like the starting and finishing was always a struggle. And I used to be distracted very easily, and even in stuff like house chores were very very difficult for me. And now, after all this work, I can do like 5 house chores at the same time. People say, because you get distracted, but I actually do all of it till the end, but just at the same time. So it kind of changed into like a huge superpower.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard people are like that. They're like, "I work better multitasking." Do you know, Xavier Rudd, the musician?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I know.
Yeah.
I know him.
So, Australian guy, he plays the guitar, the didgeridoo, and he plays drums with his feet all at the same time, so it's like a one-man band. It is absolutely a spectacle to see. But he was going to the recording studio, and when you record, they generally like you to do every instrument separately so that there's no bleed in from the different microphones. So they tried to get him to record the guitar, the didgeridoo, and the drums differently, and it didn't work. Only way he could work was when he was basically juggling the plates all at the same time,
Wow.
and that's something that I encourage people. Like, it's like if you're different in that way and that you can do multiple things, you should do multiple things at the same time. You should
Yeah.
literally live to your individual blueprint, however that shows up. And the pain that you feel is probably because there's been a long history of you not honoring that blueprint in your life.
Hmm. Or
And the degree
shaming
of that pain
yourself.
is, or shaming yourself. And the degree of that pain is also the degree of your potential, right?
Mhm.
So, if people are here for pretty, not everybody is here to be, on the world stage and a great change maker. Some people are here for more low key missions. And, they might like, "Yeah, you know what? I kinda got bored in life, and then I found that, I really like playing with kids, and that was my dharma, and I'm good to go now." So it's like they have sort of like a smaller amount of pain and suffering that corrected them. But people that
Mhm.
have, this larger period of pain and suffering, it's because that's the depth of what that can be transmuted into.
Mm. Yes, that's
And
beautiful.
yeah, and I mean, the nervous system capacity, I call that, the effects of the core wounding that people have because basically when triggers happen or when something happens, I should say, any sort of stimulus happens out there, we can either go into a freeze or a fawn response, right? Which is a repressive response, essentially. We
Mhm.
brace against it, we pull fear inwards. That's what happens in the nervous system. And so that's much more like compliance, shutting down, depression, physical immobilization. On the other end of the spectrum, we get triggered and react hot. We become, emotionally volatile. We get upset. We get reactive. That's the fight or flight response, or
Mhm.
we get distracted and move between a whole bunch of things and never get anything done. And I believe every person has a different balance of that in their sort of constitution. And some of them are more functional than others. So like you said
Yeah.
before, it's like some people do have high capacity. Yeah, some people can keep going for prolonged periods of time, but on a nervous system level, they're operating with a lot of stress,
Mm. Mhm.
right? They're just able
Exactly.
to keep it going. It's funny, like, like sometimes the older generation, like, I know these older guys, I used to work with them, and like they're kind of like, cockroaches, like they can survive like, a nuclear meltdown, basically, right? It's kind of like these guys. It's like they drink like the crappiest beer, they eat like the frozen lasagnas from the convenience store, and they never get sick. You know,
Yeah.
like they're taking prescription pills and all sorts of medication, and they just keep going, right? But I wouldn't say that's healthy.
No.
And you see what they're interested in, you see where their consciousness is, and you realize, okay, like, it comes out in other ways. It might not come out in a shutdown or illness, but it affects them in a certain way. There's a certain bracing they take, and they don't allow life in.
Yeah, and they may, be numb on various beautiful emotions. They may not experience life on more profound levels. They may not
Yes.
have that much stress, but they also don't have that much fulfillment in life.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I've never seen anybody get a 2-liter slushy from the convenience store, gulp it down, and then have a mystical revelation. Well, what the fuck?
Maybe, but
Maybe. I mean, anything's possible, but, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, there can be a buffering that happens that keeps us numb. It keeps us functionally numb, essentially.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now I'm curious to hear, how do you specifically help people increase their nervous system capacity?
Sure. So the modality that I mentioned that I've learned is based on releasing various energies, but mostly I work with like stuck emotions, um,
Mm,
which needs to be emphasized that this is released on an energetic level, but already gives a lot of relief to the nervous system. And then we work also with various beliefs. Um, but yeah, for this question, I would, yeah, maybe focus more on like the stuck emotions, because that's, I think, really important part of increasing the capacity in the nervous system. And sometimes I work specifically on the nervous system. So we specifically have the intention that we are releasing those emotions from maybe enteric nervous system, maybe amygdala, I just guided to different parts of the nervous system. And sometimes we are not working with specific part. We are just releasing it like from all of the bodies. And, during a session, I like muscle test various emotions or other energies for my client that their bodies guide me to um, focus on. And then I command the body, the energy to release them. Um, so I use like special commandments that throughout the 4 years I kind of tweaked. So they are the most affected. Um, and also to be able to repeat the session. And so it actually works when you listen to it, when you repeat it. Or, sometimes I do group sessions or I record some session and I sell it further or I give it out to someone and they can listen to it. They just state some intention and consent for me to connect to their fields. And they just listen to the session and it works like I would be performing energy work live. So that has been a huge gift that my soul kind of showed me with time. And so when we release those energies on the session, already some people may feel some lightness. Some people may have some emotions coming up on the session, especially, when they hear very sad emotions that we are releasing, for example, worthlessness, right? When we hear those, they can strike us. So, but mostly people experience release of the emotions after session. So that is already how the capacity in the nervous system grows, just through the energy work. Because uh, the capacity of the nervous system will run those processes around emotional regulation, right? So if the capacity is low, then we may not have access to really painful emotions. Because when the nervous system already holds to a lot of accumulated stuck emotions, unprocessed traumas, and maybe we are not living very healthily and so on. So it's already overwhelmed and weak, then it has low capacity to give us access to those very intense, high energetic charge of painful emotions. For example, really deep grief or feelings of separation. Those are very intense feelings. So when we perform this energy session and we release them on just energetic level, the nervous system already gets more capacity and gets the relief. So that's why my clients, after the session, they experience this emotional release. And often they say the emotions they experienced were much more intense, but also they experience much better processing of them. So they experience a relief after feeling them. And, I give them like a special practice and a special process how to go through this effectively, because we also don't normally are taught how to process our emotions properly. So they have the practice where they observe different sensations in the body, because it's very important to be connected with the body and notice the sensations and be curious about them and just give them attention rather than analyze the experience or go into our mind and into the stories of why this is happening. So through this practice, they can release like those different sensations connected to various emotions. And that already increases this capacity of the nervous system, because then it actually gives them access to those more intense, deeper layers of emotions that perhaps haven't been properly accessed before. Maybe they experienced some painful trauma, but somehow they blocked um, this experience of feeling, or the nervous system blocked it because it wasn't prepared for this, or we were children and we weren't taught how to process our emotions. So now, after such session, the nervous system feels more prepared to feel it, right? So that's how, yeah, we do this process. And then they also experience much deeper, beautiful and positive and pleasurable emotions, such as through joy or love or gratitude, right? So I, for example, because of this work, have now access to such gratitude on a daily basis that often I just cry because I can't believe that this is my life now. I used to cry every day, being in deep despair, and now I can like be happy when I see birds flying or just because I am sitting and breathing. So it's just this capacity grows for those beautiful emotions as well.
Beautifully articulated as well. That whole when you're speaking, it really landed well. And it just made me remember that, emotions in their true state, they're like a wave pulsation of energy,
Mhm.
right? It's meant to move through us quickly, inform us to take a response, right?
Mhm.
And then be
Yes.
gone, right? It's kind of like animals. If animals suffer trauma, they'll go. You'll see them shake afterwards, and then it's done. And they're like, or kids. Like I have a 2-year-old daughter, and like she'll throw a temper tantrum within the next minute. It's almost like psychopathic. She'll be smiling. She'll be like, "Dad." I only
Yeah.
say that because it's our conditioning. Like as adults, we're supposed to be like feeling the aftershocks of our emotions. We can't switch that fast, but in truth, we can. It's just that we've been so conditioned because we hold emotions trapped, like you say, and some of those more intense emotions are trapped deeper, and we can't access them until our nervous system's ready to process them. And what ends up happening is when they're trapped there, they still affect us in one way or another. And that
Mhm.
effect could be like what you're describing, where you're in sort of a deep despair and it loops and it loops and it loops.
Mhm.
And I think everybody has experienced those periods of life where it's like this emotion that I really don't like is just keeps going and going and going and going. And I know I don't want it, but it's still there and it keeps looping and looping and looping. And it's like, that's not actually, that's like, basically, it's like a car alarm going off.
Mhm.
It's not actually processing it, it's just looping it versus what
Yes.
you're talking about is that when you actually go to the thing and you process it, is like it will be intense, but that's because it's coming out of you.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, and I just see that as such a beautiful process because it restores us to that level of emotional clarity in the body so that,
Mhm.
when something does happen, we can just feel it, allow it to vibrate through us, get rightful information, like correct information from that emotion, and then act from there, right? I mean, we're fundamentally simple, right? We're just like basically bumping around in the outside world, and then we're sort of interacting with things in this like wave-like pattern of frequency, and then getting inspired on how we should respond to it, right? Using our own apparatus. So we can either
Mhm.
build things, we can either problem
Mhm.
solve, we can communicate, we can sing, we can laugh, we can dance, we can play, but it should all be this clean translation of stimulus and response that's happening.
Yeah, that's well said. And I also wanted to like share an example from my life, how this actually can be experienced. So in the past, like I mentioned, I was always experiencing rejection, and because of that, I was like crying for days and for hours, and really not feeling any relief. Right? I also feel when we are crying sometimes, because people say that, just cry it out, you will feel better. But for me, I wasn't feeling better. Well, it was because, the nervous system wasn't prepared to go deep into this emotion. And this crying was kind of like an avoidance as well of like this deeper seated emotions. So when I actually, done some of this work, I had my first boyfriends. And after first breakup with the first boyfriend, I was processing it for about 3 months. This was like about 3 years ago, or yeah, something like this. When I was already doing this work for about a year or so. So I was processing for 3 months before, when I didn't do this work and I was all the time hooked on someone. I usually was hooked on someone for about a year and then trying to get out of it for another year. So then, this 3 months after first real relationship was huge progress to what before I was experiencing, right? And then my second partner, when he broke up with me, and that was my longest relationship ever and also the most intense, I was only processing it for 2 weeks. It
Mm.
was such a deep grief. Like I never experienced such huge intense grief. Like I could feel like my heart is being torn apart, or, like absolutely, I don't know what I can compare it to because I didn't have very traumatic experiences beside the rejection, but it felt like absolutely the most intense pain I ever experienced. And because it was so intense because my nervous system already had much bigger capacity, and it allowed me to go so deep, and it was processed so quickly, only 2 weeks, because I allowed myself to go so deep. So that's, yeah, like a example from my life how this actually can work for us.
I think that perfectly ties into what you were saying before, is that you feel it more, you feel it faster, and then it's gone versus you feel it and you're kind of hooked into the energy, but it just remains there in this homogenized cocktail of other emotions that are also playing into the thing. And you just end up feeling like, what are you feeling? You're like, I don't know, but it's heavy.
Yeah, and often we also analyze it and we go into our mind rather than to our bodies, and that also blocks the experience and processing
Yeah.
it properly.
Well, that's what I call that's an important thing to bring up because we want to remove the story from what we're feeling. And I'll tell
Yeah.
you why. Because when an emotional wave hits us, it starts reverberating through us. That's the first reverb. The second reverb keeps and prolongs that wave and recirculates it inside because the mind latches on and says, no, 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 I'm going to poke this thing and make it continually move through. And it creates a story around the conditions or a reminder of something that happened in the past. And that
Mhm.
story basically embeds that emotion into the nervous system and traps it there. Right. And so when we're stuck in a feeling like blame or complaining, like we victimize ourselves, poor me, when we do that, there's absolutely no chance of a positive resolution happening, right? Because that whole story literally keeps that emotion locked. So we have to be willing to give up those dearly held stories about our identity and beliefs in order to make this work done. Well, at least that's what I've seen. That's the way that I kind of perceive it. Would you agree with that, or would you say your experience is different?
Well, on some level, that's definitely true, and we want to, as less as possible, go into our mind and analyze the experience. And because what we often tend to do, for example, we are on the healing path for 10 years, and we experienced some deep rejection, or even it wasn't that deep. Maybe we went on a date and the person wasn't interested, and we experienced rejection and we experienced lots of pain. So what tends to happen is that we may think then, oh, I done so much this work and I still feel this pain, you know, or it wasn't that serious. Like I wasn't even connected to this man and I still feel this pain. So those are different stories that actually block the emotion, the movement of the emotion, right? First step is to acknowledge that we are feeling it. And then we want to observe it. We want to observe the sensations in the body with curiosity, with self compassion. And also, the least resistance to it helps. But because I also work with the beliefs and the mind, and sometimes I work with people who are stuck in this victim mentality, and they know they are stuck in it, and they don't want to, but it's very difficult for them to move from it. What I actually suggest them is to allow themselves to feel a victim first, to release the resistance to feeling a victim. That's
Yeah.
the same with any kind of like unhealthy patterns that we may have. To first allow ourselves to do that without that much shame and guilt that we do it. Like we need to release the resistance because the resistance creates push and pull dynamic. So for me, moving from various coping mechanisms, it was actually better to first use them but without the resistance. Because when I try to move from them by forcing myself, or when I was like coming back to them, I had a lot of shame and guilt that I again do it. It was just perpetuating the state, and it was just bringing more difficult emotions and less self-love, right? But this self-love, this self-compassion, this gentleness, this releasing of the resistance to various patterns can actually help move from them. So when you find yourself being in this victim mentality, I would actually suggest to give yourself self-compassion, to not suppress those thoughts, because it's the same as with emotions. That's how I at least um, feel it's the most beneficial to work with the negative self-talk or the beliefs, is not to suppress them. If it's really difficult to not think when you're experiencing a difficult emotions, then you also want to observe the thoughts. But both with the emotional experience and those thoughts, you want to have at least tiny part of yourself that doesn't identify with it, that knows that this may not be true, but still having a lot of self-compassion rather than, suppressing it.
Yeah.
Because for some people, it's very, very difficult not to think and be in the body. So that may be like a first step that they actually can do, um, to also later go deeper in the body and the emotions.
Absolutely. And I think you flushed out what I was trying to say in more detail, because it's not like we can just go, okay, drop the story, get to the emotion. It's much more. I call it. That's what I call forgiveness. Actually, is giving something
Mm,
non-judgmental space, right?
mm,
And actually just letting it be. Like I kind of see it like sometimes these patterns are like a child that's throwing a temper tantrum, and you kind of have to listen to them and let them express themselves and let them flail around a bit. So give it space, listen to it, don't judge it,
yeah,
don't identify with it either. It's not you. It's something
yeah.
that's coming up. But through that space giving process, it usually is able to shift and morph and then become much less resistant to the
Mhm.
direction.
Yeah. And I feel big part of healing is just allowance, allowing ourselves to be as we are, allowing ourselves to even have a negative self-talk, sometimes, because, w- and it's kind of like a Buddhist belief. Buddhists call suffering dukkha, right? And when you experience dukkha, when you experience suffering, and then you start to be angry that you let's say, for example, you're angry on something, and then you're angry on yourself because you are angry on something, and then you are sad because you're angry on yourself, and then you shame yourself because you shouldn't be sad. So that creates more suffering, and it's called like dukkha, 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 dukkha. So to a way to stop it is to, you get angry on something. Okay, forgive yourself, give yourself compassion. And this compassion then breaks this dukkha and actually brings this more wholesome state.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you obviously use social media. I use social media as well. And I like your content because your content is raw and honest and authentic and vulnerable. But
Wow.
sometimes I see it there that like you see those people who resist the maybe the negativity that happens that
Yeah.
is bound to happen, right? Like, I'm being more and more transparent and honest about like, yeah, actually, like I messed up. Like, yeah, I just totally screwed that one up. Or I totally like gave into the chaos on this occasion and I picked myself back up afterwards. But some people kind of make it seem like they live a perfect life. And what that does, I think, is it models for others. Oh, I've got to be perfect. If I'm going to live in 5D, I've got to I have to be in compassion and love all the time. It's like I can't have a human emotion that's contradictory to that. But the fact of the matter is that you will, and
Yeah.
it's okay. And if you don't beat yourself up over it, you'll just get through it faster. And you know, I love this one analogy of a Aikido master in Japan who's like 8th degree black belt, and he was sparring with 30 black belts at the same time. And they were like first degree, second degree, sparring with them. And everybody watching just saw this guy like fluidly just sort of deflecting all these attackers, like just sort of like the martial arts master. And when someone came up to him after he won the match, and someone came up and said, "Master, how did you take on 30 combatants without slipping?" And he laughs and he's like, "Well, I slipped many, many, many times, but you didn't see it. I picked myself back up
I know this one.
before." Yeah, yeah. So that that's really, I think, a sign of progress is like we will slip, we will make mistakes. You will start to make fewer over time, but the
Mhm.
more important part is that you'll be able to pick yourself back up and get back on track. Actually, I kind of think like if we were always aligned, and some people kind of give that perception that I am always in alignment, I'm always attracting all this wealth, money, amazing experiences, tropical destinations, and it's unreal. It's unrealistic. It's as airbrushed as Instagram.
Yeah, and I actually experienced some of that recently, but I also live with my mother again, and I am not in a relationship. So I don't have that much triggers coming in.
Yeah. I guess it was when you say you experienced that, you mean that you experienced no problems or like,
Yeah, like recently, I don't really have that much problems. I had a lot of emotions coming up to me yesterday because of something also very, very little, and it felt like a huge rejection. So yeah, sometimes, of course, this can happen again, even if you are doing the work 4 years or if you're doing the work 20 years. This is all human emotions, and sometimes, we may feel some mm, like core wounds for even whole life. And I feel rejection is one of my core wounds. And I definitely feel less of sensitivity around it now as I am doing this work. And I can actually be myself with others. I can be uh, really silly with strangers, where before I was super shy and I barely spoke in social situations. And now I'm like this really loose person with people, but still sometimes, someone doesn't invite me somewhere and I experience like this huge pain and this old memories come from the childhood, So yeah, it comes in layers definitely, but we also get much more resilient. Like I experienced this yesterday and I was in those emotions for about half an hour and I was really, really tired afterwards. But then I got like a massage. I went to yoga. I went to a dance class and I was feeling completely amazing by the end of it. And also experiencing all those beautiful emotions during a dance class because I was dancing with all those amazing people. So, yeah, it's just like building resiliency. To feel all those difficult emotions, but also to come back to those beautiful emotions much sooner as well.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, that's, the way I see alignment is it's sort of like walking a slack line. It's where you swing out at the beginning when you're walking a slack line. It's like you wobble from center more, right? It goes way out, way, and you're like off balance. And then like balance becomes this finer and finer calibration, right? And so in the middle of the slack line, it's sort of like it's just a little bit like going off to the left, off to the right, but you're pretty much on that course. Because the consequences, because we're operating at a higher frequency, the consequences become more drastic when you step out of alignment because it's like playing with a higher voltage.
Mm.
So there's laws that sort of keep us on track more and more the more that we do this work. But I think the last question I have for you is, what do you typically see happen for others when they increase their nervous system capacity? Like, what are the results that you've seen with your clients over time when they really fully engage this work?
Sure. So, yeah, the first thing that I already mentioned is that they have this better capacity to process their emotions. That's like the first result that happens even after this one session in the first week. And then over time, I just have so many different intentions with clients. So I just try to think about like maybe main thing that happens for most of them. It's definitely experiencing more lightness in life, um, better capacity to deal with various challenges and even really, really painful ones. Mm, it's being more in touch with their bodies, which also, is connected with those better emotional regulation. They have more energy, so they can handle maybe more projects, or they improve in their work. They have better relationships with others because they also improve their communication. Because, for example, they have better emotional regulation, so mm, they may be less afraid of rejection, so they can communicate more vulnerably with others. Um, what else? There's just so many things in so many areas of life. They just start feeling better, more in peace. Their moods get regulated better. They have more inner strength, mm, and they become healthier. They have more vitality. Mm. They also start being more creative. They start maybe coming back to old passions, or exploring new passions. Mm. And they also feel more in touch with the spirit. Many people said that I helped them um, like change the relationship with God. Maybe before they couldn't even hear the word God because of religion, and they started developing their own relationship with God. So yeah, it's overall improvement in all areas of life.
Okay, wow. So overall, improvements in all areas of life. I bet if you're listening to this right now, you're like, I want that. I just want to go straight there. So my question is, how can people find out more about you and kind of take that next step with you? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you actually have brought two options for people.
Yes. So my brand is called Devotional Alchemy. And I actually checked today, if you Google Devotional Alchemy, if this is just my work there. But no, there is some other brand that actually does shibari. So like the, uh, s-
The
um,
ropes, the tantra
yeah, the
ropes.
ropes. So that's not me. That's another devotional alchemy. But yeah, I have two options that you can start from. One is free one-time access to negative attachments removal or entity attachment removal recording. And another will be a donation-based energy scan for beliefs and energies that your body wants to let go for any of your intentions. So you will write your goal, your intention, and I will test, um, some number of beliefs, which organs your body wants you to focus on more, which body systems need more support, mm, and what other energies or patterns your body guides you to focus on. And then you will get a practice from me, sitting with it practice, where you can work with those different beliefs and emotions. I will probably test some emotions as well. So you can already start doing the work yourself. And if you feel like you'd like more support with it, you want to accelerate this process with the energy work and with my support, then you can reach out later if you enjoy that.
Wonderful. So the links for both these down below beneath this interview for anybody to go and check out, and they'll make sure that the links take them to the right devotional alchemy, and they won't end up in Shibari workshop, which you might want anyway, but who knows? Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you for this interview. This has been a very enlivened, enlightening space and talking about some really much needed subjects today. Is there anything you'd like to say to leave the listeners of the show with before we finish?
Sure. Today I have like this, actually from since few days, I have this thoughts that may help many people, because there is this advice going on in this emotional healing space, don't avoid your emotions, just feel your emotions. And maybe many of you heard that, but maybe it didn't help you. Like maybe you try to feel your emotion, maybe you try not to avoid them, but it's still very difficult. And maybe the trauma responses are activated automatically. So, for example, you experience a trigger and you lash out on someone without even thinking, or you get frozen, you can't speak up. So this is because this is low capacity in the nervous system. So the key is not to not avoid your emotions or just feel your emotions, but to focus on increasing the capacity in the nervous system first. And there are many methods for that. You can work with me, you can work with someone else. You can start from simple somatic exercises, but to really deeply do that, then there are special skills that require that kind of work. But just get interested in that, learn more about the nervous system. That will already bring some knowledge. The knowledge can bring you acknowledgement of your states, and acknowledgement is first step to healing. So that's already a lot.
Thank you so much. That's a really wonderful consideration to leave people with. So I hope everybody has enjoyed this show, has enjoyed what Amelia's come here to share. By the way, if you're curious about what your core wounding might be, I've developed a very innovative tool. There's a link below. You can get your free core wounding report using my new trifecta system. So based on your day of birth, it will give you a very precise reading for your core wounding and a 3-day free program to actually shift that into a gift. So thank you very much for listening to the show. And you've got a lot of free material to boost you to the next level of nervous system capacity, of self-awareness and discovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.